Thank you guys for coming out.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your film and why you decided to make it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a wild ride, so thank you guys for buckling in on a Friday night for that. It is a close one as well. It's a story that has been with me for that's been in my head for the last 10 years, but it's basically based off of my own story of my own family. So I'm born and raised New York City. Grew up in Harlem. Hey, yeah, there we go. Yeah, there you go. Grew up in Harlem, and so Harlem is very dear to me, and it's my mission to kind of put Harlem on the map, same way Spike did for Brooklyn. So I think that you don't really see it too often in the media, and there's so much beauty in it, and that was even just one location. But in essence, it's about, not only is it focused on, my own family as influence, but it's meant to apply universally to families that are going through certain turmoil and hardship and separation, like, that example. But it's meant to shine light on not only, these children, but also these parents and families in general, so everyone can see kind of a little bit of what everyone's going through and the gridlock that happens when you're in the middle of that fallout. So yeah, and I was able to, very, very cathartic, but I was able to shoot in the home, the brownstone that my parents actually lost in their divorce. So it was a very wild ride, and that was the first time we revisited it. My mom played the grandmother, so it's very like full circle.
Oh, that's neat. All right, questions? All right, one of my questions is, why did you decide to use animation instead of just having him dress up the whole time?
Yeah, thank you for that question. For me, this is I've produced, assistant directed, and executive produced 5 films prior to this, but this was my directorial debut. So for me, when I wanted to make a film, I wanted to do it, and this is kind of who I am as a very ambitious, relentless, and kind of doing the most if I'm going to make a film. So I wanted to really tie in not only the manipulation of time and space as a storytelling device, but also on top of that, let's add animation to be basically the undercurrent of the story. So for this to really maximize the potent impact of having this child psyche, you have TJ, who's this 10-year-old trying to escape to his fantasy world where he is kind of his own superhero. But it begs the question of what happens when your reality of what's going on that you're trying to run away from and escape from invades your fantasy world to a point where you can't hide from it. So for me, it really was, not only visually to kind of show on screen, like a Black Buzz Lightyear kind of figure for kids growing up, because I was never able to see that. Right, I saw a lot of films growing up. Thanks to my dad, he got me into films, watching Indiana Jones and James Bond and all the above. But I would always try to envision, like, what is the Black equivalent to that? And so I wanted to really show that in this film. And I was very fortunate to have a super talented animator on board, Noah McNeil, who not only did the animation, but he also did the composing. So super talented cat, and worked with me very closely to pull off that Afro-astronaut. But yeah, I think, again, if you think about, Space Commander TJ, that's exactly where the audience is sitting in the cockpit with him as he's kind of revisiting these memory fragments and trying to decipher what's going on in there. Yeah.
Was there some acceptance, more acceptance and closure, even though it was so open to the public, of a very emotional experience?
Yeah, for me personally? Yeah, great question. It was a very cathartic experience, I think, for not only me to approach the subject in general, but to make a film about it as you're kind of bringing up, but for me, I'm a big person of dramaturgy, so for my cast, right, the parents, they really needed to balance this nuanced performance, because I really wanted to make sure no one was painted in the wrong or it's their fault kind of as the main contributor. And it's a very balanced tightrope to walk the line, and then on top of that, you have to have a couple that is performing both happy and sad moments and keeping that chemistry on both sides. So to get that across, my actors, I actually have them meet with my parents and kind of get personalities down and also get their stories down. So for my parents to re-engage and kind of open up that chest, it was very therapeutic for them. And you know, they really opened up to a degree I don't think that they had done yet. And I think that is a representation of their kind of main climax moment when they're in that parlor room. You know, it's meant to, a parlor room in a brownstone is meant to be this kind of, you know, space for entertaining. And so for me, I was very much, well, this is our stage, this is our performance moment. And so fortunately, both of those actors come from a theatrical background. So I really wanted to give them that moment to kind of showcase they're arguing their position, but they're not hearing each other. And so that's kind of the decisive battle that's going on. They won't give any to listen to each other. But yeah, very cathartic process for sure.
Yeah. Steve?
In that process where you had your actors meeting with the parents, did you learn anything about the parents that you didn't know before?
That's another great question. I love these. For me, the kind of essence of this film came from my college essay. So my college essay's headline was adults are children. And that was kind of, you know, as a philosophical cat, I still am, because again, this film is meant to explore the philosophical discussion of what is the American dream, how does that equate to the Black American dream, what is the perfect couple, what is the perfect Black couple. But yeah, to get to your point, you know, I knew the sense of, all right, yeah, the happiness faded, the chemistry was no longer, they weren't in a place where they wanted to be married and engaged in partners, but I was able to hear from them both on the reasons why they weren't. And I think to that question, it really helped us further design the script, because it got to a point where we could understand, you know, well, I just wasn't being seen, I wasn't being heard. And so having those feelings, as my sister and I joke a lot about, has taught us to be one day the perfect spouses, because we learned so much from them of how, you know, they didn't work. But yeah, I really got a closer look on why, you know, specifically it didn't, versus when we were kids, just being like, what? We thought our parents were going to be, you know, the perfect couple forever. So yeah, it was a much closer look, and I think it was great to, in this mature decade later, place to revisit that.
All right, Bart?
How did the Fujifilm sponsorship come about? What did that entail?
Yeah, great question. You know, with this project, we were going to make this film for $15K because I had won a grant at the end of December the year prior, and it was kind of my goal to just make a film with whatever we can get. And my cinematographer, Nona Katusenu, has actually a relationship with Fujifilm, and they have this initiative where they will, you know, you're able to pitch them as filmmakers on projects that they might find interesting. And as a result, if they're interested in the project and they like your pitch, they will actually help you bring it to life. And so when Nona came to me with that idea, because I love to pitch on things, I was like, okay, perfect. But then I called her the next day after, and I was like, hey, Nona, are they just going to help us out and give us some camera equipment, or does that have money involved? And she's like, oh no, they'll bring you a budget. And so this film actually turned into, out of all these short films I've made, the largest production budget that I've worked on. And so we pitched them. I pitched them on this project. I already had the location secured. I had my cast. I had my crew. And I pitched them on $65K. And they basically were like, we hear you on that, but we want to properly pay your crew. And I was like, me too. That sounds great. And so we will raise you and we'll give you $70K if you could find $23K to bring to the project. And so this turned into a $93K production, which was the largest short film production I've worked on in terms of budget-wise, which is great. So again, it was like a perfect storm as the directorial debut, because I've worked up from a $20K to a $50K project to a $75K to this, and I was just fully equipped to kind of really dive in. And then they were super supportive and kind of gave me full creative control throughout the process, which I think was really special, because you don't really find that in too many grants out there.
All right. And my last question is, obviously, the question that we have to ask. What did your parents think about seeing their story on the big screen.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, you know, they see how good it looks, and they were like, oh, actually. Yeah, they were, I think for me, you know, they had, I've worked in advertising for like the last 7 years, and then I quit my job on Juneteenth last year to pursue filmmaking full-time, because I was doing it in my back cave and basically doing 2 jobs at once. And so for them, they got it in the sense of they know the authentically relentless, vulnerable with intention kind of filmmaker that I am within all of my art in general, and they wanted to support that. And so they knew I was going to get pretty vulnerable, but again with intention from it. But for them, it's like for them it's their proudest moment, because they can see that I'm a pragmatic optimist, so this is how I look at the world. But they see that there is something that comes from what we all went through to a point, and that's the whole purpose of this film, is to be an educational PSA, to show that there is, through all the craze, like a light at the end of the tunnel. As it might be very dark and like you're going through a black hole in the moment, but there is a way, whether it's a mindset or a learning, that will equip you later in life. So for them, it's like, to see that that's what I got out of their little dance, I think they're pretty proud of that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Cameron.
Thank you all very much.